As you saw in the preview, this video is about what if the moon falls to Earth. Sit back and get comfortable, and if you enjoy the video, please support the channel by subscribing, leaving a like, and writing a comment. And we begin. What if the moon falls to Earth? At first, nobody believed it, because the moon had always belonged to the sky, the same way oceans belong to the shore and stars belonged to the night, eternal and distant and untouchable. But then, astronomers noticed the orbit shrinking by fractions too precise to dismiss, and within weeks, the news spread across every screen on Earth with the cold certainty of mathematics. The moon was descending. Slowly at first, so slowly that ordinary people still went to school and work and restaurants, while scientists argued in frantic conferences beneath glowing simulations of orbital collapse. But every night, the moon appeared larger than before, swollen and pale and horrifyingly alive above the cities. Children pointed at it from apartment windows while their parents pretended not to be afraid. Tides began changing long before anyone could fully understand the consequences. Coastal towns flooded under skies without storms. Entire beaches vanished overnight beneath walls of black water that rose silently in the darkness. Fishing boats were found balanced on rooftops miles inland. In Jakarta, Miami, Osaka, Lagos, and Rio, evacuation sirens screamed endlessly, while highways became rivers of trapped headlights stretching to the horizon. The oceans no longer obeyed the Earth alone, they answered to the falling moon. Weeks passed, and the moon continued to grow. It dominated sunsets like a second world pressing against reality itself, so enormous that details invisible before now scarred its face. People could see mountains on its surface with naked eyes. Vast craters stared down like dead eyes in the heavens. Religious movements erupted across continents. Some called it judgment, some called it rebirth. Others simply collapsed into panic. Markets failed first, governments followed more slowly. Satellites drifted unpredictably as gravity warped around the planet. Power grids flickered under endless storms generated by tidal forces ripping through the atmosphere. Earthquakes shattered regions far from tectonic boundaries. The crust itself strained beneath the changing pull. In Chile, an entire mountain range cracked open with a roar heard hundreds of kilometers away. Volcanoes awakened in chains around the Pacific, vomiting fire into blood-red skies. Ash spread across continents, turning daylight dim and bronze-colored. Yet humanity kept watching the moon. Every night it filled more of the sky, until it no longer felt like an object in space, but a ceiling descending toward the world. People stopped sleeping. Cities glowed at all hours as billions stared upward in collective terror. In New York, crowds gathered in Times Square beneath giant screens, counting down the estimated days until Roche limit, the point when the moon would begin tearing apart under Earth's gravity. Nobody knew exactly what would happen after that. Some scientists predicted rings of debris, others predicted extinction. The uncertainty became worse than certainty itself. Daniel stood on the roof of an abandoned hospital in Boston, watching the moon eclipse half the sky. He had once been an astrophysicist before the universities closed and the governments redirected every resource towards survival projects deep underground. Now he simply watched like everyone else. Beside him stood his younger sister, Leah, wrapped in a blanket against the unnatural cold spreading across the continent. "It looks close enough to touch," she whispered. Daniel said nothing because the truth was unbearable. The moon did look close enough to touch. It hung there, immense and textured and impossibly detailed, casting shadows sharp as knives across the city. The tides had reached Boston 2 days ago. Water flooded the subway tunnels and surged through lower streets, carrying cars like toys. Millions had already fled inland, but inland offered no safety anymore. The entire planet was changing shape. News from around the world came in fragments now. Europe suffered constant megastorms rotating across entire countries. India faced heat waves so severe, birds fell dead from the sky mid-flight. Australia burned beneath electric blue lightning storms that ignited forests faster than rain could extinguish them. And above it all, the moon descended. One night, the screaming began.
not from people, from the Earth itself. Deep, metallic groans rolled beneath the ground everywhere across the globe as tectonic plates shifted under gravitational stress. Buildings trembled continuously, roads split apart. In Tokyo, thousands ran into the streets as skyscrapers swayed like trees in violent wind, though the air remained still. Daniel heard the sound beneath Boston, too, a deep, endless moan rising from beneath the planet, like something ancient awakening below the crust. Then came the meteor showers. Tiny fragments stripped from the moon's outer surface entered Earth's atmosphere in blazing streams that painted the skies gold and white every night. At first, people celebrated them with desperate awe. Videos flooded the dying internet, showing children dancing beneath the falling stars.
But the fragments grew larger. A piece the size of a bus annihilated part of Madrid. Another struck the Pacific and generated tsunamis that erased entire island nations. Scientists confirmed the impossible soon after. The moon was beginning to break apart. Humanity had crossed the threshold. Daniel spent his final weeks helping at refugee shelters where thousands packed into underground parking garages lit by generators. Food supplies dwindled rapidly. Medicine disappeared. Yet people still told stories. They still sang songs quietly in the darkness while the earth trembled around them. One old woman claimed humanity had always belonged to the moon, and now it had simply come home to reclaim them. Nobody argued anymore. Arguments felt meaningless beneath that gigantic white world looming overhead. Then the sky changed forever. The moon cracked. It happened during daylight over the Atlantic. A dark line appeared across the lunar surface, visible even to ordinary eyes. Millions watched live broadcasts as the fracture widened silently across the face of the moon, like a wound spreading through flesh. Then another crack appeared, and another. Entire continents froze in terror. Even from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, the destruction looked enormous. Vast chunks began drifting apart in slow motion, while clouds of glowing debris expanded outward like smoke. The moon was dying above them. But its death was not peaceful. Over the next 48 hours, the heavens rained destruction. Thousands of lunar fragments burned through the atmosphere every minute. Cities vanished beneath impacts brighter than nuclear explosions. Firestorms consumed forests across Siberia and Canada. Oceans boiled where massive debris struck water. Shockwaves circled the globe endlessly, flattening everything not built underground. Daniel and Leah hid with hundreds of others inside a reinforced transit tunnel beneath Boston while the world ended overhead. Dust fell constantly from the ceiling. The tunnel shook so violently at times, people believed it would collapse. Somewhere far above, humanity's greatest cities burned beneath falling pieces of the moon. Then gravity itself changed. The moon's fragmentation disrupted the delicate balance between Earth and its satellite. Tides rose to impossible heights. Entire oceans bulged visibly toward the sky. Coastal regions disappeared forever beneath walls of water taller than mountains. The Atlantic surged across eastern North America in a single, unstoppable flood. Boston drowned within hours. Water thundered through streets and subway systems with enough force to pulverize concrete. Deep underground, Daniel heard the roar approaching through the tunnels long before the water arrived. Panic exploded instantly. People screamed and pushed toward sealed emergency doors while lights flickered overhead. Leah grabbed Daniel's arm so tightly her nails cut into his skin. The roar became deafening. Then black water burst through the far tunnel like a living beast. Daniel barely had time to drag Leah onto a maintenance ladder before the flood consumed everything below. People vanished in seconds beneath churning debris and darkness. The water climbed relentlessly through the tunnel system, carrying cars, steel beams, bodies, and fragments of shattered civilization. Daniel and Leah climbed until their muscles burned. Above them, emergency hatches led toward the surface, but the surface no longer existed as they remembered it. When they finally emerged into open air, they stood atop the skeleton of a drowned city beneath a sky filled with fire. Boston was gone. Endless water stretched to the horizon, reflecting the burning atmosphere in waves of crimson and gold. And above it all, the shattered moon filled nearly half the heavens, broken into colossal fragments, still descending toward Earth.
Some pieces appeared so massive they covered entire sections of the sky like floating continents. Others burned as they entered the atmosphere, leaving glowing scars across the clouds. Daniel realized then that humanity had misunderstood the disaster from the beginning. The moon was not merely falling. Earth and moon were becoming one dying system, spiraling together toward mutual destruction. Days lost meaning afterward.
The survivors drifted across ruined landscapes searching for food and higher ground while the planet convulsed beneath them. Continents flooded and fractured, entire regions sank beneath rising seas, while others thrust upward in catastrophic mountain-building events caused by tidal stresses. The atmosphere thickened with ash and vapor until the sun appeared only as a dull red glow behind permanent clouds. Yet through every storm and darkness, the moon remained visible, broken, vast, approaching. Daniel and Leah joined a caravan moving west through the remnants of America. Millions traveled inland, though inland itself transformed constantly. Rivers reversed direction, new lakes formed overnight, lightning storms stretched from horizon to horizon without pause. Sometimes at night, the surviving fragments of the moon aligned in the sky, creating the illusion that the satellites still existed whole. Those moments terrified people most because they resembled the old world too closely. Near the ruins of Chicago, they encountered a crater 50 kilometers wide where a lunar fragment had struck days earlier. The impact had melted the city into black blasts. Nothing remained recognizable except twisted outlines buried beneath cooled stone. Leah stared silently at the devastation while ash drifted around them like snow. "Do you think anyone survives this?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked upward. One fragment of the moon now appeared larger than any mountain on Earth, hanging low enough to reveal jagged cliffs illuminated by sunlight. He understood then that survival itself no longer meant anything familiar. The Earth they knew had already ended. Maybe something does, but it won't be us anymore. Months passed. Humanity dwindled. Communication between regions vanished entirely. The survivors became scattered tribes wandering a broken planet beneath a shattered moonlit sky. Strange phenomena emerged as gravity fluctuated unpredictably. In some regions, people reported objects lifting briefly from the ground during lunar alignments. In others, the air itself seemed heavier, crushing lungs with every breath. The natural order of Earth unraveled piece by piece. Forests died beneath poisoned rains. Animals migrated in impossible directions or threw themselves into the sea. Yet life persisted stubbornly, even at the edge of annihilation. Tiny flowers bloomed in cracks of volcanic stone. Children were born in underground shelters. People still fell in love. Daniel saw it all with growing numbness as the final approach began. The largest remaining fragment of the moon dominated the sky now, so enormous that daylight dimmed whenever it passed overhead. Scientists who still possessed functioning equipment estimated impact within weeks. There would be no escaping it. No underground bunker could survive what was coming. The fragment was simply too massive. One evening, Daniel and Leah reached the Rocky Mountains, now transformed into jagged islands above endless inland seas. From a high ridge, they watched the final sunset of the old Earth. The sky burned deep violet beneath layers of ash, and the colossal lunar fragment loomed above the horizon like the face of a god descending from heaven. It moved visibly now. Human eyes could actually perceive its motion across the sky. Leah leaned against him silently. Around them, thousands of survivors watched too, gathered across the mountains in absolute stillness. No one cried anymore. Fear had burned itself empty long ago. The fragment descended lower each night until eventually it filled the entire sky from horizon to horizon. Details on its surface became landscapes unto themselves. Gigantic cliffs cast shadows over Earth. Vast plains of gray dust glowed beneath reflected sunlight. Humanity stood beneath another world hanging impossibly close above their own. Then came the final day. The oceans rose first, climbing thousands of meters high toward the descending fragment. Entire seas lifted from Earth's surface in glittering pillars visible across continents. The atmosphere screamed with endless hurricanes spiraling around gravitational fractures. Mountains collapsed, volcanoes erupted simultaneously around the globe, and above it all, the moon fragment descended in silence. Daniel held Leah's hand as the sky disappeared completely beneath stone. The world grew dark under the shadow of the falling moon. People around them stood frozen in awe before the unimaginable scale of extinction approaching from above. Yet in those final moments, something strange happened. The fragment began breaking apart again under Earth's gravity, exploding into billions of burning pieces that filled the atmosphere like a second sun. The heavens turned white, air ignited, oceans vaporized instantly into expanding clouds of steam. Shockwaves tore mountains from the crust. Daniel saw the world become pure light. He felt Leah's hand tighten once beside him. Then Earth and Moon collided at last, and the history of humanity vanished beneath a storm of fire that reshaped the planet into something entirely new beneath the silent stars.
For millions of years, the Earth remained a wound drifting through darkness, its oceans gone, its continents melted into rivers of fire beneath an atmosphere thick with ash and poisonous vapor. And the remains of the moon circled the shattered planet as glowing rings of debris, stretching across the black sky like scars left by the collision. Nothing human survived the impact. No cities remained buried beneath the crust. No signals echoed through space. Every monument, every book, every memory of civilization had been erased in a single hour of unimaginable violence. Yet the planet itself endured. Deep beneath the molten surface, beneath oceans of magma and storms hot enough to melt stone, tiny fragments of life hidden in cracks of rock and buried oceans beneath the crust persisted through the apocalypse. The Earth cooled slowly. Centuries became millennia. Firestorms weakened into endless rains. Steam condensed into newborn oceans beneath skies permanently veiled in crimson clouds. Mountains rose where impacts had folded the crust upward like broken skin healing over a scar. The rings of lunar debris glowed brilliantly across the heavens every night, larger and brighter than the old moon had ever been, reminders of the world that once existed. In time, the first living things emerged again into the cooling seas, strange and altered by the violence that had reshaped the planet. Evolution accelerated across the wounded Earth. New forests spread over black volcanic plains. Creatures unlike anything from the old world crawled beneath towering fungi and pale trees, nourished by mineral-rich soil from the collision. Millions more years passed in silence. The scars of humanity vanished completely beneath stone and sediment. The Earth forgot its previous masters. Continents shifted into unfamiliar shapes. The climate stabilized beneath a dimmer sun, obscured partially by the permanent ring system overhead. The sky itself looked different now. Nights glowed silver because the shattered remains of the moon reflected endless light onto the planet below. Generations of new creatures evolved beneath that luminous sky without ever knowing the catastrophe that had created it. And then, intelligence returned. They were not human. Their bodies were tall and slender with pale skin adapted to the cold silver nights, and their enormous dark eyes reflected light from the rings overhead. They lived beside the shores of vast inland seas, where cities of smooth black stone rose beneath glowing skies. They studied the heavens from their earliest civilizations because the sky fascinated them with instinctive terror they could never explain. Ancient myths among them spoke of a dead god shattered across the heavens, whose fall had once burned the world clean.
Priests and astronomers argued for centuries over the meaning of the glowing rings surrounding the planet. Some believed the rings were divine remains, others believed they were warnings. None understood the truth buried beneath kilometers of stone, until they found the ruins. It began in what had once been the Rocky Mountains, though time and tectonic violence had twisted the region into jagged cliffs overlooking silver oceans. A mining expedition searching for geothermal energy discovered a layer of unnaturally smooth black material far beneath the crust. At first, they believed it volcanic glass left from ancient eruptions, but deeper excavations revealed impossible shapes hidden within the stone. Straight lines, perfect angles, hollow chambers sealed beneath rock older than their entire civilization. News spread rapidly across the world. Scientists descended into the depths, carrying lights through tunnels untouched for hundreds of millions of years. There, they found the skeleton of another species, human remains fossilized beneath collapsed stone, thousands of them trapped within underground shelters, destroyed by heat and pressure during the collision. Entire chambers still contained fragments of machines fused into rock, symbols etched onto corroded metal, walls covered in faded images. The new civilization stared at these discoveries with growing horror, because the beings preserved beneath the mountains looked disturbingly familiar, different yet unmistakably related, ancient cousins erased by a forgotten apocalypse. Excavations expanded across the planet. More ruins emerged buried beneath layers of geological devastation. Towers preserved beneath lava flows, fragments of roads deep beneath oceans, enormous fields of black glass where cities had once stood before being melted by lunar impacts. The evidence became undeniable. Another intelligent civilization had ruled the Earth long before their own existence, and it had died violently. Their greatest scientists eventually reconstructed the truth from scattered evidence. Orbital simulations revealed the impossible history of the moon's descent. Geological scars matched models of planetary collision. Beneath mountains of stone, they found preserved digital fragments containing images of blue oceans, green forests, crowded cities, and a white moon hanging peacefully in the sky. This discovery changed their civilization forever. Fear spread across the planet because the rings still circled overhead. The remains of the moon still haunted the sky each night. Their species began wondering whether the catastrophe could happen again. Vast observatories were built across deserts and mountaintops to monitor the orbital debris. Children learned about humanity in schools. The extinct species became both a warning and an obsession. Some viewed humans as tragic ancestors destroyed by cosmic fate. Others believed humanity's destruction had been punishment for arrogance. Entire religions formed around the memory of the collision. Yet one discovery disturbed them more than any other. Deep beneath the ruins of what had once been Central Asia, explorers uncovered a sealed underground archive protected within layers of heat-resistant alloys. Unlike other ruins, this structure had survived mostly intact because it had been built extraordinarily deep. Inside, they found preserved recordings from humanity's final days, millions of voices stored within ancient devices, videos of crowded shelters, families speaking to cameras while the moon filled the sky behind them, scientists delivering desperate warnings,
children asking questions nobody could answer. The final moments of an extinct civilization preserved beneath stone. The new species watched these recordings in silence. They saw oceans rising across drowned cities. They saw people staring upward in terror under the descending moon. They saw the last sunset of old Earth beneath a sky dominated by another world. And among the countless recordings, one fragment spread across their civilization more than any other. It showed a man and a young woman standing atop a mountain ridge beneath a colossal shadow of the falling moon. The image was damaged and silent, but the expressions on their faces remained clear even after hundreds of millions of years. Fear, awe, acceptance. The recording ended in white light as the camera dissolved in the heat of impact. Nobody knew their names. Nobody knew they had once been Daniel and Leah, yet their final moment became immortal. Statues were carved in their likeness across a world reborn from humanity's ashes. Poets wrote epics about the lost civilization that watched the sky fall. Philosophers debated whether intelligence itself was cursed to destroy its own world eventually. And above them always hung the rings, brilliant and eternal reminders of the moon that had once descended from heaven to erase an entire species. Ages passed again. Technology advanced. The new civilization eventually reached space. Their ships moved through the luminous rings, collecting fragments of the ancient moon. Some astronauts reported overwhelming dread while floating among those endless fields of pale debris. It felt less like exploring rocks and more like drifting through the bones of something dead. Within the largest fragments, they discovered preserved ruins from the moon itself, shattered remnants of old human lunar colonies crushed during the collision. Skeletons still floated inside broken chambers, exposed to vacuum for geological ages. Humanity had reached its moon before the end. They had tried to survive there, but when the moon fell, even the sky had offered no escape. The new civilization learned everything eventually. They uncovered humanity's art, music, literature, and history from surviving archives hidden beneath the planet. They learned about love and war and hope and fear. They learned that humans had dreamed of immortality while living on a world already doomed by gravity and chance. And slowly, against all logic, the extinct species became beloved. Humanity transformed from a warning into something sacred. The new beings admired the terrible courage humans displayed during the final days of Earth. Even knowing extinction approached, they had still sung songs, held hands, protected children, and watched sunsets beneath the falling moon. In time, the descendants of the reborn Earth built a memorial unlike any structure their civilization had ever created. On the dark side of the largest lunar fragment still orbiting the Earth, they carved an enormous monument visible from space itself. Two human figures standing together beneath the sky. One man, one young woman, facing the end of the world side by side. Beneath the monument, they inscribed words translated from one of humanity's final recovered transmissions. "We were here. We saw the sky fall. And we were not alone." Hundreds of millions of years later, long after even the reborn civilization faded into extinction beneath the changing universe, the monument remained. The Earth drifted silently around an aging sun beneath glowing rings of lunar debris. Oceans shimmered under silver nights, wind moved through empty ruins worn smooth by time, and high above the silent world, the broken moon still circled forever, unable to escape the gravity of the planet it had once destroyed.